Hi everyone! This week's First Chapter Friday is The Matchstick Castle by Keir Graff. We will start with the description. Brian can think of a few places he'd rather spend his summer than with his aunt and uncle in boring Illinois. Jail, for example, or an earplug factory. Anything would be better than doing summer school on a computer while his scientist dad is stationed at the South Pole. Boring lives up to its name until Brian and his cousin Nora have a fight, get lost, and discover a huge wooden house in the forest, with balconies, turrets, and windows seemingly stuck on at random. It looks ready to fall over in the next stiff breeze. To the madcap, eccentric family that lives inside, it's not just a home, it's a castle. Suddenly, summer gets a lot more exciting. With their new friends, Brian and Nora tangle with giant wasps, sharp-tusked wild boars, and a crazed bureaucrat intent on bringing the dangerously dilapidated old house down with a wrecking ball. Chapter 1. The worst summer ever. It was supposed to be the perfect summer. I was going to camp out, build forts, have adventures, and score the championship-winning goal in the New England All-Star Under-12 soccer tournament. When I wasn't doing those things, I was going to stay up late with my friends, eat as much junk food as I wanted, and pretty much do whatever I felt like until 6th grade started in September. It was going to be epic. The all-time best summer ever. Instead, I ended up in boring Illinois. No, I'm not kidding. There is a town called Boring, and it is. How did this happen? I asked myself that question on the way to the airport in Boston, on the plane, and on the drive to Uncle Gary's house, which was actually just outside Boring, so I guess technically it's almost boring. And I was still asking myself that question early on the afternoon I arrived, while Uncle Gary showed me how to use the educational software he had developed. You guessed it. I was having summer school on a computer. Uncle Gary's program was called Summer's Cool. And if you think that's funny, don't laugh. You might be next. Now click here to start, Brian, said Uncle Gary, leaning over me and breathing stinky coffee breath into my airspace. The screen in front of me showed subjects like language arts, math, science, social science, and art, listed on a chalkboard in handwriting that was supposed to look like a little kid's. Why do grown-ups think all kids make their R's backward? And why would a kid be writing the lesson plan? That's the teacher's job, if you ask me. Uncle Gary was pointing at language arts, so I clicked there. A boy and a girl scooted onto the screen. They looked like they were drawn by little kids too. I'm not very good at drawing, but I could have done a better job. I was starting to feel like I was in kindergarten. "I'm Darren," said the boy in an annoying kid-like voice. "And I'm Dara," said the girl in the same voice, only higher pitched. "You picked language arts," they said together, sounding twice as annoying. "Ready? Get set? Learn!" The chalkboard disappeared and a story opened like the pages of the book. "After you read the story, there will be a quiz," said Uncle Gary, "and if you get enough answers right, it will let you move on to the next lesson. And if you get too many wrong, you'll be prompted to reread the passages that caused you difficulty." "You really made this?" I asked. "Well, I did have a little assistance from some highly respected educational engineers," said Uncle Gary proudly. I should have mentioned that my cousin Nora was sitting about 3 feet away on the other side of a folding table in the middle of Uncle Gary's office. She obviously didn't need any help. She had her headphones on and was clicking away like she was getting paid a penny per click. She's 1 year older than me and about 2 inches taller. Uncle Gary has spent most of the ride from the airport telling me what an amazing student she was. According to him, she was the smartest girl in her class, the smartest girl in her school, maybe even in the whole country. And who knows, maybe he was right. I hadn't seen Nora since I was 5 years old, and I slimed her with a booger at somebody's wedding. I figured she'd just try to get me back. Hadn't she ever played booger tag? But she started crying and I had to go sit in the car. I'm not exactly a good student, but I am great at soccer and climbing and, well, lots of things. So far, Nora and I weren't hitting it off any better than the last time. When Uncle Gary brought me from the airport, she looked like I was a birthday present she'd gotten 3 years in a row. And in the couple of hours since then, she'd been acting like she wished she could return me to the store. "Think you got the hang of it, Brian?" asked Uncle Gary. Nora stopped clicking and looked up, like she was curious how I would answer. She reminded me of a scientist studying a chimpanzee. "Sure," I said. It didn't look that hard, even for me. "Great. Then I pronounce summer's cool officially in session." While I put on my headphones, Uncle Gary crossed the room and sat down at his desk in the corner and started working on a computer with 2 big screens. He's the kind of guy who was really hard to describe because there wasn't really anything you remembered about him. He didn't have glasses, or a mustache, or even any hair on top of his head. If he got kidnapped and the police asked me what he was wearing, I wouldn't have had a clue. His office was the same way. It reminded me of the big office supply store I went to with my dad a few months ago when he needed to buy some new report covers for the deep science data he'd printed out. The store had all these fake offices set up that made me think of grown-ups playing work the way the kids play house. All Uncle Gary's office was missing was the price tags. The only thing that made it interesting at all was the old-fashioned model ships on top of the bookcases. I especially liked the fast-looking one with the red smokestack. I wanted a closer look, but they were all out of reach, which I'm sure was the point. If I could, I would have climbed aboard that ship, raised a skull and crossbones flag, and steamed right out of Boring, Illinois forever. 4 days ago, I was walking home from the last day of school, kicking my soccer ball down the sidewalk past the other row of houses and making plans for the summer. But when I got home, things changed in a nanosecond. My dad was running around the house trying to do 3 things at once. While I followed him upstairs to his bedroom, he told me he'd gotten a phone call that morning from the National Science Foundation. If he could be ready by Monday, they said, he could go to the South Pole. He's an astronomer, and one of the most powerful telescopes in the world is at the South Pole. He'd been applying to go for so many years that none of us thought it would actually happen. As he lugged his suitcase back downstairs, he explained that the astronomer who posted there slipped on the ice and broke her right hand and her left arm. How do you slip on ice in Antarctica? Don't they give you spikes or something for your boots? And it's not like you don't know you're on a continent completely covered in ice. But the deal was that my dad would fly down on a plane that would bring the astronomer back. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," he said, opening his suitcase on the kitchen table and then picking up his phone, which was beeping like it was going to blow up. I couldn't say no. My brothers had to be excited too. Barry, who's cool but goes to college, already had plans to spend the summer in Maine getting certified as a wilderness guide. And Brad, he's annoying, but still lives with us because he's in high school, would be peeing his pants because he was going to spend his summer working in a pizza parlor and playing video games with his best friend Isaac. Dad had already talked to Isaac's parents, and they invited Brad to stay with them. "Everyone else is getting to do something awesome," I said. "What about me?" Dad looked up from his phone and gave me a "here's the bad news" smile. "You're just as important as everyone else, Brian, but most people already have plans for the summer." "I could stay with Uncle Sean," I suggested. If I couldn't stay home, Uncle Sean was definitely my first choice. He was always doing something exciting. "He's going to be taking photographs in Mongolia," said my dad. "Well, how about Grammy and Grandpa?" Summer at their house wouldn't be exciting exactly, but their guest room had a TV, their fridge was stocked with soda, and there was an overgrown abandoned factory I wanted to explore just down the road. They're heading out west to a seniors-only RV roundup. No kids allowed, I'm afraid. Well, how about Oscar or Diego? They were my best friends and my teammates on the Boston Beans, which is the top under-12 soccer team in eastern Massachusetts. Dad shook his head. Oscar's family is taking a Caribbean cruise, and Diego already shares his room with his grandma. But at your age, I'd rather have you stay with family anyway. I'm sure your mother, if she were here, would agree. I had no way of knowing what she would or wouldn't have wanted. I never knew my mom. She died when I was really little. My dad talked about her a lot, and there were lots of pictures about her around the house, but he only brought her into the argument when he really wanted to win it. I was doomed. Then where? I asked, slumping into a chair. Your Uncle Gary and Aunt Ginny said they'd host you for the summer. Of all the places I could have been sentenced to spend the summer, including a desert, jail, the moon, and outer space, my absolute last pick would have been Uncle Gary's house in boring Illinois. It's not often a town is so perfectly named for its residents, but Uncle Gary, Aunt Ginny, and Cousin Nora were the most boring people I had ever met. I had never once heard of them doing anything even remotely interesting. Think of it as an adventure, said my dad, tapping his phone with his thumbs. Well, that's easy for you to say. You actually get to go on an adventure. Dad put his phone in his suitcase. Where I knew he'd forget it. Came around behind me and gave my shoulders a rub. You never know, Brian. You might have one too. So, because the length of chapter 1, we actually quit just with like 2 or 3 pages left of chapter 1. But this is going to have lots of action, and this one's going to be really funny. So if you're a type of person who really enjoys action books or adventure books or humor books, or even if you just like a little bit of fantasy, I think you'd really enjoy the Matchstick Castle. So be sure to run by and check it out if you are interested in chapter 1.